All right, if you're an aspiring barrister in Australia, you know there are certain cases that are, well, they're more than just cases. They're foundational. And today, we're diving deep into one of the big ones, R versus Knight. This isn't just any sentencing decision, it's a case that really pushes the boundaries of punishment under the law.
So the outcome here was stark: imprisonment for life. But here's the thing you've got to remember. This wasn't some automatic check-the-box sentence. No, this was a discretionary call. The judge had to work through this absolute maze of legal principles to get there. And understanding that journey, how they landed on life imprisonment, that's not just exam prep, that is a core skill for any barrister.
And that really brings us to the heart of what we're talking about today. How on earth does a court get to that point? What goes into the decision to impose the most severe penalty we have? I mean, we're talking about taking away someone's freedom forever. What's the process for that?
Okay, so to really get our heads around the sentence, we have to start where the judge started, with the facts. And let me tell you, in this case, the court wasn't just looking at a crime. It was staring into a set of actions so extreme, they just challenge everything. Let's get into the clinical evidence.
Now, the facts the court had to consider were just brutal. And the job of the court is to look at them with total objectivity. So Catherine Knight, she pleaded guilty to murdering her de facto partner. The evidence showed, well, it showed she stabbed him 37 times with a butcher's knife. And it didn't stop there. The body was then decapitated, mutilated, parts of it were skinned, and some parts were even cooked. These weren't allegations being debated. These were the undisputed, grim facts that set the stage for everything that followed.
So, once those horrifying facts were on the table, the court had to move into the really tough part of the job. The judicial balancing act. And this, right here, is where a barrister earns their keep, arguing how you weigh someone's personal story against the absolute horror of their crime.
So this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's not like there's a simple formula. You've got these scales. On one side, you pile on all the things that make the crime even worse. We call those aggravating circumstances. On the other side, you put the things that might, lessen the blame a bit, the mitigating factors. So how did the judge in this case even begin to balance those scales?
Well, let's just say the math here was incredibly complicated. Just look at the aggravating factors. They were just overwhelming. You've got significant premeditation, the sheer level of extreme violence and mutilation, and what the court saw as a complete lack of remorse. The judge even viewed her claim of amnesia as a cynical ploy to avoid responsibility. But then on the other side of the ledger, you have the mitigating factors. She did plead guilty, there was a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, she had no relevant criminal history, and there was a history of alleged sexual abuse. The judge's job was to somehow weigh all of this.
So, after wrestling with all those competing factors, the judge had to make a call, a classification. Under the New South Wales Crimes Act, they had to decide exactly where this crime fell on the spectrum of just how bad a crime can be.
And the finding? It was crystal clear. Justice O'Keefe found that this murder fell into the worst case category. Now, you have to understand, that's not a term a court uses lightly. It's an incredibly rare classification, and when it's used, it changes everything for the sentence. So what does worst case category actually mean in plain English? Think of it as a legal line in the sand. It's reserved for crimes that are just so objectively awful, and where the offender's personal situation just doesn't do enough to explain it away, that the only real option left is the maximum penalty. It's basically the court saying, this is the absolute upper limit of criminal behavior. So why a life sentence? The judge didn't just pull it out of thin air. They justified it based on 3 core principles of sentencing. First, retribution. This is about punishing the wrongdoing and showing society's outrage. Second, deterrence. Sending a powerful message to anyone else that this kind of act will not be tolerated. And third, and this was probably the big one here, protection of the community. Plain and simple, removing a person who is a demonstrated threat from society. And all these elements bring us back to why we're even talking about this case. If you're studying for the bar, R.V. Knight isn't just some gruesome, shocking story. No, it is a fundamental lesson in the art and science of sentencing.
Honestly, you can think of this case as a complete masterclass. First, you get to see that balancing act between aggravating and mitigating factors in action. Second, it gives you a textbook definition of what that worst-case threshold really looks like. Third, you see those big principles, retribution, deterrence, community protection, actually being applied to a real set of facts. And finally, it's a perfect example of how crucial arguments about premeditation and remorse are in shaping the outcome.
And really, nothing says it better than the judge's own words. Justice O'Keefe summed it all up. After looking at absolutely everything, the chilling facts, the psych reports, all the legal arguments, the conclusion was just unavoidable. The crime was so far beyond the pale that the law's most severe penalty was the only one that fit.
You know, a legal journal article about this case was called Monstrous Wickedness and the Judgment of Night. And that title really sticks with you, doesn't it? It leaves us with a really fundamental question, one that every lawyer has to wrestle with. When you're faced with something this monstrous, what is the true purpose of punishment? Is it just about payback? Is it about protecting the rest of us? Or is it something deeper? Definitely something to think about.